Hello, you guys. So today we're going to be doing price elasticity of demand. So we're starting with the elasticity chapter and specifically price elasticity of demand. So let us begin. So, firstly, what is price elasticity of demand, which is like the acronym for it is PED? So, let us begin by defining it. So, it's basically a measure of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a good to a change in its price. This means once there is a change in price, how does this affect the quantity demanded? So, how does a change in price affect quantity demanded? In other words, this is basically it. Okay, so how do we calculate PED? Because this is what you usually get in paper two questions. So paper two is common for SL and HL students, and you basically, in most of them, if not all of them, you have to either know how to calculate PED or YED. So they usually ask about one of the two. So I will be teaching you how. So just to clarify on what price elasticity is, it's just basically when the price of a good slash product changes, how does the quantity demanded change? So how, in response, what happened to the quantity demanded? So this chapter basically discovers every single scenario and the types of goods and products and how these changes happen accordingly. So now for the calculation. So to calculate PED, you have to basically divide the percentage change in quantity and percentage change in price. So it's this divided by this. Now, this is how you do it. To calculate percentage change in anything, you have to basically um, do so. Like the formula for percentage change is basically new minus old divided by old times 100. This is basically how it works. So since quantity demanded and price are inversely related, so basically they when one like increases the other decreases basically. So yeah, PED is always negative. Thus a negative sign is often omitted so they don't really show it. So now we're going to be discussing in detail what every single value of PED means. So the frequently encountered cases, meaning these are things that are like this is the outcome that usually happens with most goods. So in most cases, when the PED is greater than one, this means that the price is elastic. What does it mean when the price is elastic? It means that the when there's let's say there's a 10% change in price. Let's say 10% increase in price if you want. Um, there will be a 20% decrease in QD. This means that quantity demanded. This means that the change in quantity demanded as a response to the change in price is larger than the change in than the actual change in price. Okay, this is basically what that means. Okay, so I'm gonna give you an example. Let's say about strawberries. So this is just an example about strawberries. So let's say that the price of strawberries increased by 10%. So strawberry, this is just an example, price increased by 10%. So basically, 1 kilo was $4. Now, 1 kilo is $4.4. Now, the QD, basically, if they used to sell 100 kilos per summer, this is just like a really, really, really weird example. It's 100 kilos per summer. Then now, after the price change, they are basically selling, let's say, 80 kilos per summer. Um, Okay, so they are selling 80 kilos per summer. So this is basically a 20% decrease in QD, quantity demanded. This is basically, so basically, as a response to the $0.4 increase in price, there has been a 20 kilo decrease in QD. This is basically it. This is how it works. So this is basically a response. Now I'm gonna briefly discuss the graph with you before we continue. So I'm actually gonna demonstrate, like draw a graph demonstrating the scenario that I just created. Basically, remember that in every single microeconomics diagram, you have price for the y-axis and you have quantity for the x-axis. Okay, so let's first let us draw the demand diagram, demand slope. Sorry, I don't know why I said diagram. So demand, and then here you have um 100 kilos, and here you have 80 kilos. Let's just do this. We're just gonna do this. This is the price of 4, and this is 4.4. When the price increased from 4 to 4.4, the quantity demanded decreased from 100 to 80. Okay, so basically this is how it looks like, um, more or less or more so, uh, when it is price elastic. This means that the PED is greater than 1. And why is that? Didn't we discuss that the PED is basically percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price, right? And didn't we talk about how we have a 20% divided by a 10%? So then we have 2 over 1, which is basically 2. So PED is greater than 1 because it's 2, because 2 is basically greater than 1. So basically, this is it. Now you have the second most frequent case, or like they're both frequent, just one's price elastic and one's price inelastic. So price inelastic is basically price inelastic. So price inelastic, I don't know what happened to this, sorry. So basically, price inelastic is when a change in price results in a less proportionate change in quantity demanded. So this happens to things that basically have less alternatives. So basically, if you want less alternatives, or maybe the price is negligible, meaning that um, the increase in price is not really like, it doesn't really affect one's like income or salary, meaning that, or like their savings, meaning for example salt is really cheap. It's like $1. If they make salt $1.5, so there's a 50% price increase, then this is not really going to affect the people buying salt, whether they're low income or high income. So this just basically explains it. So price inelastic. Okay, so basically price inelastic means that the PED is less than 1 but greater than 0. Okay, so this is when um, I just explained that the price changes, but the quantity demanded also changes. So there is a change in quantity demanded, it's just less than the change in price. So basically, if there's a 10% change in price, then there's going to be like a 5% change in um, quantity demanded. That's really it, okay? So that is really about it, okay? So yeah. Then, if you want an example, like you can just ask me in the comments, I'll give you an example. So now we have special cases. So you have when the PED is equal to 1 unit elastic. What does this mean? This means that the percentage change in price is the exact same as the percentage change in quantity demanded. So the quantity demanded changes as much as the price changes. So let's say there's a 10% increase in the price, there's going to be a 10% increase in the quantity demanded. And this is why the graph in this case is basically a sort of parabola. Why? Because basically it's the exact same changes. Literally, it's the exact same. Okay, this is a really, really rare case. I don't really have an example in mind. I don't think it's ever happened. Maybe it's happened. So you need to like check an exact product because it's really, really, really specific. Okay, and the PED in this case is 1. Why? Because the percentage, like the percent change in quantity demanded and price is basically the exact same. It's gonna be like, let's say 5 over 5 or 10 over 10, whatever, it's always gonna be equal to 1. Then you have special cases when the PED is equal to 0. This is actually something that's frequent where in the pharmaceutical industry. Why? Because medications are necessities. So this happens to necessities, and not only are they necessities, but they have no alternative. Okay, so basically, pharmaceutical companies are the only ones producing medications, right? So they can hire their prices as much as they want, because they know that people are gonna pay and people are gonna buy the products they're producing, the goods they're producing. Why? Because people need these goods, and no one else can produce these goods. So pharmaceutical companies feel free to really increase prices. This happens specifically in many countries. There's a lot of backlash on it. There's a lot of problems regarding this, but this happens for pharmaceutical companies or pharmaceutical products in general. So it's perfectly inelastic. What does it mean for something to be perfectly inelastic? This means that no matter how high the price is, quantity demanded will never change. And this is why the graph looks like this. So you have P, you have Q, then you have QD, and then you have whether the price is P1 and it increases to P2. It doesn't matter. Quantity demanded will never ever change. Okay, so the demand curve is vertical, and I have this trick for my friend, not for my friend, sorry, for my students. I. So basically, I is basically vertical as well. So I stands for inelastic, so it's vertical, the way it's I. So this is like a small trick for my students to remember the graph. Then you have PEDs perfectly elastic. This means that when there's a change in price, there's a really large change in quantity demanded, and this is why the graph is like this. Um, it's a E, so E for elastic. And then there is, um, so the price changes just a bit, but the quantity demanded will change a lot. The demand curve is horizontal. So this usually happens for luxury goods, things that people don't really need at all, things that just people buy out of leisure just for fun. So this is basically it. These are the diagrams. Okay, so this is price inelastic. So when it's greater than zero but less than one. So basically the change in quantity demanded as a response to a change in price is less than the change in price. Okay. Then you have price elastic. So basically the change in quantity demanded as a change to the price is actually greater. Um, okay, it's greater. So here 10 is greater than 5, and here 5 is basically less than 10. Okay, so this is just that. Briefly, in elastic, you can see that the exact same amount and the quantity demanded has changed in the change in price. It's the exact same, which is why we have this sort of parabola. And then you have I for inelastic and E for elastic. So these are the examples I gave you. So this just explains the sort of mathematics in a curve. This is not something you should really like know. I say particularly, especially for papers 1 and 2. So yeah, this is not something you should really like worry about. It just discusses the different like the mathematical part of this. So if you want to pause and read this, then you can. It's just the mathematics behind this. Then you have the angle curve. So this is the angle curve. Basically, I'm not gonna go into this just because it's a HL material and some SLs are watching this. But basically, this talks about the different types of goods, luxury goods, necessities. So yeah. So and basically, elastic goods are basically here, and then you have the inelastic goods, which are basically here. So this just discusses everything. For the angle curve. Like this just shows the angle curve. And then we have determinants of PED, which are really important, and you have to discuss this. Remember, in paper 1, so whenever you have determinants, so this has to do with this chapter and other chapters. Like, for example, we're talking about determinants of demand and supply. So whenever you're talking about determinants, you mention all the determinants. And you choose 2 or 3, which you talk about in specific. Usually the question asks you about 2. So you talk about 2 in specific. And you basically, how do you mean, what do I mean? You talk about them, you explain them, you draw diagrams, you explain the diagrams, you use real life examples through the diagrams. So this is how you do it. So you choose 2 determinants, but in general, you have to state all of the determinants at least. So first you have substitute products. So first you have the number of the substitutes products. So if it's so basically elastic. So basically, if a product has many substitutes, if product has many substitutes, an increase in price would lead to consumers switching to the substitutes because there's many substitutes. So they have substitutes. What do substitutes do? They basically satisfy the same need or they meet the same need if you want, meet or satisfy. Inelastic if it doesn't have many substitutes, an increase in price wouldn't cause a large drop in quantity demanded. If you want a substitute, for example, an example is Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Okay, so basically that's an example. Closeness, elastic. If two products are very similar to each other, people would switch more easily in case of increases in price. Okay. In elastic, if two products aren't very similar, people wouldn't switch that easily because they don't really provide the same need. The broader the definition of a product, the more substitutes can be found. Then we discussed necessities versus luxuries, elastics. So necessities, which are products that people can't go without. So here you have, for example, water. People can't go without water. People can't go without medication. So I talked about the pharma industry. Um, Increases in price wouldn't affect the quantity demanded a lot because people need these. So in special cases, you have addiction. So this has to do with like cigarettes, for example. This has to do with narcotics. If legal, if illegal, that's also a different case, but they're also inelastic, even if illegal. Luxuries, which are products that are not necessary, their increase in price would lead people not to purchase the product as they are not essential. So they're things people can live without. People just buy them for leisure, they buy them for fun, they buy them for like a sort of extra dose of happiness, but people can't survive without them. Length of time. So this just talks about short term versus long term. So elastic, people can switch between products in the longer term, but it takes more time. So in the short term, things are more inelastic. So long term elastic, short term inelastic. Proportion of income spent on a good, elastic. The product's price is a large portion of a person's income. So if it's basically a large portion of a person's income and they make it more expensive, so basically it's gonna be elastic. Okay, and this usually goes for low income earners, but it's inelastic for like it's things are more inelastic for high income earners because it's a negligible portion of their revenue. So for example, let's talk about I'm just gonna say TVs, for example. It's a weird example, but if the price of TVs increases by $500, maybe for low income earners that's a big deal, and because it's a larger portion of their salary. Let's say it's like 40% of a low income earner's salary, whereas for high income earner's salary, it's maybe 5% of their salary, so they don't really care. This is an example when you're talking about someone's salary. And then impact on total revenue. So I think this is for HL only. So yeah, but I'm gonna go over it. So basically, the amount of money received by firms when they sell a good, it's equal to the price times the quantity sold of a product. What does this mean? In very, very, very simple terms, this means that total revenue is equivalent to price times quantity. Okay, P times Q. But if there's an elastic demand, this means that the increase in price will actually lead to lower total revenue. Why? Because then we talk about how elastic price means that the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than percentage change in in price, right? So basically, if the price increases by 10%, then the quantity demanded will decrease by 20%, let's say. Okay, so they're gonna ultimately lose revenue. Whereas if there's a decrease in price, this will lead to a higher total revenue. Why? Why would this lead to a higher total revenue? Because there's the decrease in price that is basically gonna be less than the increase in the quantity demanded. Okay, this is basically it. And for inelastic demand, it's different. For inelastic demand, it's quite the opposite. Basically, an increase in the price will basically lead to a higher total revenue. Why? Because P will increase, but Q will decrease, but barely, or might not even decrease. Therefore, there's gonna be higher TR, so higher total revenue. Whereas the decrease in price will result in a less proportionate increase in quantity demanded, so total revenue would decrease. Okay. And unit elastic demand. So then we talk about unit elastic demand, meaning it's the exact same. So the percentage change in quantity demanded is the exact same as the percentage change in price. So basically, nothing's gonna change. P and Q change equally. Okay, so total revenue won't change. A firm can decide whether they want to increase its price or decrease it in order to increase total revenue based on PED. Similarly, a government can tax products with low elasticity in order to maximize tax revenue. So also, government can tax things like medications because they know they make more money. Now, this is also for HL, it's just very short. Primary commodities versus manufactured products. They actually asked about this, like they used to ask about it in the old syllabuses, not as much in the new one. Primary commodities, goods arising directly from the natural resource land, often considered necessities and having limited substitutes, which is why they have low PEDs, because they have no substitutes. Manufactured products, they're goods produced by labor and capital, often have many substitutes, which is why they have high PEDs. This is basically the lesson. If you are an SL student, you will probably have a paper one on this. There's a chance, but if you're HL, it's less likely because they usually tend to ask more about chapter 7 for your paper ones. For paper 2, they will just likely ask about the formulas. Again, you never know what comes in the exams. But basically, this is it for the lesson. We're going to continue with income elasticity rather than price elasticity, demand elasticity next time. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any questions, comment down below. Bye.